Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services Podcast Studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and on this episode of In the House, we're going to be talking about frozen pipes. I know it's spring, but if you want to find out what I'm talking about, stick around. Thanks so much for tuning in. In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, air conditioning. Each week we pick a topic and we discuss it. This week, like I mentioned, we're talking about frozen pipes, but here's the thing. It's spring, right? It's kind of warm outside. Why am I talking about frozen pipes right now? Well, from talking to plumbers, one of the things that I've learned is that sometimes you don't actually find out that you had a frozen pipe until the spring. Here's why. So this is going to be a shorter episode. I'm just going to give you a couple of things to go check just to make sure that you don't have, or that you didn't have, a frozen pipe over the winter. So a lot of homes nowadays, they are actually built with what's called a frost-free hose bib. And if you can imagine, a frost-free hose bib, or the way that a hose bib works, is when you turn that knob, there's a piece that creates a seal and stops the water from coming out of the house. Now, over the years, they developed these frost-free hose bibs because they realized that in colder climates, like here in Utah, now if you're in a warmer climate, this may not apply to you at all. But if you're in a colder climate, so the reason that they developed these is because they found out that the closer you get to the outside of the wall, the colder it gets. And that's where a lot of the freezing will happen. So these frost-free hose bibs, they took that mechanism that creates the seal, that valve that closes. When it closes, the water is right behind it. And if it's close to the outside of the house, those colder temps can cause that water to freeze. So they're like, oh, hey, this is a good invention. We'll create a frost-free hose bib, and we'll take that valve portion that cuts the water off, and we'll move it back inside the house. So if you can imagine where your exterior wall is, where you turn the hose bib on, there's a piece that goes back even further. It's a long copper tube, and it goes back, and there's a rod that goes back, and the valve is back behind the house, where in theory it should be warmer and less susceptible to freezing. Now, in theory, that's great. But what'll happen is, if you've heard me talking, or any plumber really, you may hear that, like, okay, when that first cold freeze temperature comes through, they might recommend that you go around and do a few things. And one of them is unscrew the water hose from your hose bib, because what can happen is, when you are using the water hose, especially if you have a sprayer attachment on the end, if you just go and turn the water hose off, that water hose is still full of water. So is that hose bib, or the frost-free part of the hose bib, where the water is turned off until you relieve the pressure and it drains out. And so if you forget to unhook your water hose for that water to drain, what can happen is, when it freezes, it doesn't freeze back behind the valve, that frost-free part that's further in the house. It freezes between the valve and the hose bib on the outside of the house. And what happens when water freezes? It expands, and it can cause that copper to split, and you don't really notice it because there's a little bit of water in there. And so if it melts and it thaws, it might drip and leak a little bit. But what'll happen is, you won't find out until the spring, until this time of year, that happened, because if it froze, you're not usually using your water hose in the middle of the winter. There's no need to do it. And so when spring comes around, I've noticed a lot of people water in their yards, using their water hoses and things like that. This is the time of year where, if you hook that water hose back up and you go and you open that valve, all of a sudden that whole thing is pressurized. And so where that crack appeared, where that split, where that burst pipe was, the water all of a sudden is just spraying out. And the thing that sucks is that it's usually spraying out inside the house. So you might not find out until you realize you've got water dripping down from the ceiling. So do this for me. If you haven't already, go and turn that hose bib on, and have somebody down in the basement on the other side of the wall, because that pipe usually goes straight through, down in the basement or on the other side of that wall on a lower level, and have them listen. Turn it on, see if they can hear water spraying, or see if they can see something. If you do, turn that back off, or go shut the water off at the house, you probably are going to have to call a plumber unless you possess the ability to then go and repair that yourself. But they're going to have to cut a hole up in the ceiling, probably leave you an access panel, cut that copper off, put in a new hose bib, solder that together, and fix that for you. But that's why I'm talking about frozen pipes right now in the spring. Not because you're getting frozen pipes, but because there are a lot of people, we get a lot of calls this time of year where people have a busted pipe and they didn't realize it until now. So it's really important to unhook those hoses, which, you're not going to go do right now because you're using it. But make sure you go and when you turn that hose bib on for the first time, that outside faucet, go and make sure you're not having a leak inside the house. Leave me a comment now if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching this. Leave me a comment below. Let me know if you've ever had an experience with a burst pipe. I was talking to Cam, who's producing the show today, not had an experience with a frozen pipe that's burst on him. I also have not in any of my personal home. I was about to say any of my personal homes, like I've got multiple. I've lived in multiple homes. I only have one home that I own. Anyway, not that fancy yet. Maybe someday. Maybe if the podcast blows up, blow the podcast up so I can get a second house. Does that work for you, Cam?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Anyway, so thanks so much for listening to this episode of In the House. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of In the House. Do me a favor, leave me a comment. What are some things you'd like to hear us talk about? Thanks so much for listening. See ya.